Dave Straley, and we're continuing with our project to record and video record and also get some sound recordings of folks that rode at Long Beach State Crew and over the years, and get some stories. Today I'm with John O'Donnell, who I describe as the man who replaced Pete Archer.
That's not fair. Nobody replaces Pete.
That's what they say, but maybe we can start out with John. You can tell us, I believe you were in the lightweight crew that won the Western Sprints in 1974, correct?
I was on the team. I was not in the A boat that won that particular event, but I was on the lightweight team back in 73, 74. They had a very successful year that year, and a lot of times we'd be able to enter 2 boats and finish 1 and 2 in a lot of our meets. So things were a very successful season, a lot having to do with the coaching and that we got.
Okay. When you started at Long Beach in what year?
73 and 74.
73 and 74.
Big year.
All right. Then you graduated in
1977.
Okay. And you rode from all the way through to 77, or did you?
No, I only actually rode the first year and a half.
Okay.
And then I was an Air Force ROTC cadet, and it was taking me away from practice at least once a week, and so it just the overhead just got to be too much.
Right. How did you come back? So you went into the Air Force, then you came back to the Long Beach area, and how did you get back into this volunteer and sort of essential piece of Long Beach State history here?
Got back into rowing, discovered masters rowing, adults competitive rowing, back in the mid-'80s, and competed with a group out of Newport for about 10 years. And then my kids got old enough, and I was aware of the junior program that Long Beach had, and got them into the program here. Wound up as a novice coach with the junior team for a year, and then the next year I wound up getting recruited by the head coach for Long Beach State, Scott Strong, and I've been here ever since for about the last 8 or 9 years. Started out coaching for about 6 years, the men's novice team every year, and in the last 2 years I've stepped aside and more or less working as the equipment manager, boat master, whatever you want to call, taking care of some of the loose ends around here.
When you rowed and when I rowed, boats were made out of wood.
Yeah.
It was unusual to have a boat that didn't have a cocock on it somewhere, at least in this boathouse. Things have changed. Were you in there for the transition? Did it happen all overnight? Did Long Beach just suddenly start going to getting rid of cococs and wood and going into glass or composite?
Well, by 1977, I think everything was still wood, and I remember lining up on the start line and looking across, and to me it was just like art on water. All those boats, all shellacked and wood grain and everything, and I just thought it was beautiful. But when I got back into the sport, I didn't realize there was an adult rowing segment, and when I got back into it in the 80s, everything was already composite type materials. The wood boats were already gone. It must have happened fairly suddenly. The one thing that I did experience is that we had been using tulip shaped oars all the while I rode, and that happened all the way up until the early 90s when the hatchet style blades came out, these big rectangular blades that you see almost used exclusively now. And that was a big step forward for rowing. I mean, and when you stuck a hatchet blade in the water, it gripped immediately. I mean, those people that came out of rowing with the other tulip oars saw a big sudden difference in their rowing with the new blades. So yeah, I saw at least that, the change in the blades over to that. But by the time I had gotten back in as an adult, composites were already ruling the day.
We were talking earlier about repairing boats, and you mentioned that Pete Archer used to repair a lot of boats with the T, the rudder for the coxswains in the old Pocox went all the way back to the end. There was a rudder at the end of the stern, and there was a metal T that ran the wires up along the sides that they would use and that would poke. Maybe you can just take it over. And where I'm going with this is, so that was what Pete Archer used to repair. It was one of his big. What do you see nowadays as well, why don't we go back and explain? You can explain better than I can.
The old days. Yeah, the old days with Pete. I mean, all of the boats were basically balsa wood planks, and so when somebody punched a hole in it, it was sort of like piecing out that entire thing and laying a new piece in, re-shellacking, sealing everything up. It was quite a big ordeal for them to. It was really an art form to repair the boats. Nowadays, when we poke a hole in it, the composites are a little different, and we can lay in materials, fillers in that, and if the hole isn't too large, and start sealing it up and smooth it out. It's simpler now, but you have to be very careful about disturbing the balance of the boat, not just putting in heavy fillers and just thinking you can get away with it, but to really keep the shell in good shape. But everything gets pretty expensive nowadays. All the repair costs, the boats themselves are just alarmingly expensive.
When we rode, they used to keep a bucket of large can of Crisco, probably a gallon can, out by the door. And as you took your oar, your wooden oar, you would stick your finger in and grab some of that Crisco and put it around the button being the part that went up against the oar lock, so that the oar would feather and turn nicely. Any comparable today? No. Any comparison with it's all graphite or something?
It was the same thing, the big jar of Crisco at the end, a little paintbrush, and just pour your finger and just slop a little bit on there and wipe it off, put it back on the next day. But no, nowadays the collars and that are all plastic and hard plastic, and they rotate pretty well in the oar lock, so you don't have that need to put a lubricant in there at all to keep things moving smoothly. The equipment is a lot better in that way.
And the rigging itself, any changes from? I can't remember. I'm guessing it was stainless steel was what we used to have on the Pocox.
Yeah, you still use a lot of stainless steel parts. The riggers are all aluminum, and being on salt water, we have to watch out for the corrosion factor in that. Probably the biggest difference that somebody from the 60s, 70s would see in today's boat is they put electronics into the boat, where cox boxes, where the coxswain actually has a microphone and speakers and can talk to the entire crew without having to scream and be heard over all of the other commotion that's going on out there. And they also get feedback as to the stroke rate in that, so they can monitor the stroke rate. And with some of the other equipment, they can actually monitor the speed of the boat, if they opt for all of the different things. Now, those things aren't required, and if they're not working, no referee is going to allow you to stop racing just because it's not working. But people have gone accustomed to that's the way they know it now. Yeah.
Do you have to repair the electronics too?
Yeah, to some degree. There's some things we can do, and some things we just have to send out. Send back. There's a company that pretty much has the market cornered on it, because the sport's fairly small and there's not a huge demand for these things for them to market them widely. But on the whole, they're pretty resilient, and they do well.
All right, and to finish up here, for at least on this session, you got thinking back. Any memorable, funny, hilarious, serious event or
I think
something you recall fondly or not so fondly that might have happened?
I think one of them was that we used to make a weekly trip out to the Queen Mary on Saturdays, and I was out in one of the lead eights that day, and the fog was sort of rolling in. But the main thing was we'd always sprint out of the harbor exit because the water was rough there to try to get over it. Well, we went right into the fog, and the rest of the crew was a little bit smarter than us, and they turned back. So we spent the next couple of hours out there among the drill islands trying to figure out where we were. And by the time we came out of the fog, we were over in LA Harbor. You know, and just like, oops, we missed the Queen Mary entirely.
Great, great.